with me today. He is the Director of Winemaking at Williams Selyem Winery. And I'm with Chris Bowland, who is my co-host and our color commentator, and
George Clooney impersonator.
Yes, he wanted to go by Chris Clooney instead of Chris Bowland. But Chris is also the vineyard manager at Williams Selyem. I didn't realize you were the official vineyard manager until I actually looked at the website. Pretty cool. So I have the team. I have the dream team that makes it happen with me today.
Yeah.
So I feel very honored to have both of you.
Yeah, great to be here, Susie.
Thank you. Thank you. And by the way, I snuck in a taste of the Pinot you opened.
Oh,
it's absolutely delicious.
It's super young, but wow, the aroma is just terrific, I think. It's, old vines. I mean, Chris, you actually farmed this for a little bit, right? I think.
Yeah, for a little while. We planted the young block.
Yeah, it's a wine called from a vineyard called Cone on West Side Road, up in the sort of the hills up on what's that little road? Felta Ridge Road, kind of up that way. Gosh, it's nearly 50 years old, I think. Right?
Yeah, it's way up there. It survived several fires.
Well, it's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, you have a very impressive background. I've researched you. I know things about you.
Impressive? I don't know.
Yes. So, Jeff did not do the traditional winemaking route. Didn't you start out with a degree in, is it biology?
In biology, yeah. So I grew up in west of Seattle, in a little town called Bremerton, which was on the Olympic Peninsula. And grew up there. I went to the University of Washington, and kind of I've always been sort of a science geek, and Chris probably knows this well about me. Just, I love looking at numbers and just have a very scientific sort of, outlook. And
so you have that in common.
Yeah, and I majored in biology, specifically molecular and cellular biology, so it was really studying sort of like DNA structures and all this sort of stuff. It just was sort of interesting to me. When I graduated from the University of Washington, I worked in kind of the cancer research biology field for a number of years. So I was fortunate enough to work with this amazing woman in a lab at the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center in Seattle, which is a preeminent. It's where they actually pioneered bone marrow transplants. It's an incredible, actually, institution. They have academics, they have a hospital, and they have I forget where they study like public health, that kind of stuff, and they study. I forget that line of work, but. So I worked in the basic science part, and interestingly enough, I worked on Saccharomyces on yeast as a model system to understand certain genetic pathways that led to potentially cancer. So, so I was it's kind of funny that I'm a winemaker today because I really understood the biology and the kind of down to the DNA level sort of yeast. And here I am playing with yeast to make wine. So. Kind of comes full circle a little bit, but I had a really great career as a research scientist. I published papers, and most of my career I worked for this one person.
You were obviously very young to be published too.
And this is how motivated I was. Even as an undergrad, I published a paper as an undergrad, and then I was actually working in the botany department, and as a freshman, not even a freshman, a sophomore junior, I had sequenced a gene in this. It was kind of a funny sort of part of my life where I was actually studying. Then I was studying, even around here, there's red tides, that affect algae blooms and that kind of thing. We're working on a specific type of algae that was potentially involved in creating these red tide things or events out in the ocean. So I had sequenced a gene and had published that paper as a sophomore, junior. So that was quite an accomplishment. So I kind of felt like I was sort of destined for for a career in science, and that was sort of the path that I wanted to go. Worked so the woman that I was working for, she accepted a faculty position in the same field, this research. The specific thing that I was working on was called telomeres. So it's sort of been in the news a number of years ago, where telomeres are sort of interesting. They're the best analogy is on a shoelace, the little plastic thing that holds the shoelace together. A telomere is a physical structure on the end of your chromosome that protects your DNA from mutation, and mutation, of course, leads to potentially cancer. So it's kind of studying all the mechanisms involved in like preserving the telomere, basically, on your DNA.
Wow.
And so this woman that I'd worked for accepted a position at Princeton University, and moved across the country to New Jersey because I had nothing. My wife and I had just recently married, and it was like this great opportunity to go and live a
So you lived
new
in
life.
Princeton?
Lived in Princeton for a number of years. Worked in the biology department, which was amazing. Actually, it's an incredible institution.
Oh, I can imagine.
And just being around the very first year that we were there in the biology department, somebody had won the Nobel Prize, and so it was kind of in science. So it was kind of cool to be around that energy and that sort of level of I don't know, science and intellect and everything. It was pretty exciting.
Now, my understanding was that while you lived in Washington, you started exploring different wines.
Yeah. So I mean,
Like prior to even going to Princeton.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Washington State is still pretty amazing. I mean, it's a powerhouse in the wine world, and I got a chance to explore some of those wines in the early sort of the youth of the wine industry up there. Our wines included. Wine's just so expensive today, right? And 25, however long ago that was, wines were pretty cheap, right? So you could explore different things and wines from different regions. There wasn't a huge commitment because it didn't cost you a lot. And gosh, I remember even back then, the great vintages of Bordeaux and Burgundy, those bottles, the 80s, the late 80s, the early 90s wines, were like $20-$30, which was probably still a lot of money back then, but.
Oh yeah. Were you a collector then at that point, or
I started to collect a few bottles, things that I, found interesting. I was like, squirrel away a bottle or two. I mean, the collection wasn't huge. I mean, maybe a couple of cases worth, and just stored in my parents' house or whatever in the basement. In Washington, I mean, in California we don't have basements, right? But up in Washington, you could underground basements, and the wine kept perfect temperature kind of thing. So yeah, I got a chance to explore a lot of cool things and taste and Woodinville, which is sort of like in Western Washington. It's where all the sort of an industrial center. There's a lot of wineries. A lot of grapes are grown in Eastern Washington. They truck them to Western Washington, and that's where people make the wines, and that's where like a lot of the tasting rooms are. So in Woodinville, which is an hour and a half north of Seattle, basically north of where the University of Washington was, just started exploring and tasting wine, and so it was that sort of. I kind of think that's sort of the beginning of my interest, right, and just collecting and talking to people, and then always pursued my. I really did want to go and get my PhD in science. Actually, I really felt like that was my career path. I really got a lot of fulfillment out of the discovery of something, maybe something super minuscule in the science world, but that led you to something else, another discovery, and so on and so forth. So that whole concept sort of intrigued me, and I felt like, I was going to get my PhD. I was going to be, a professor somewhere, and that was going to be my life. But
then something happens.
Yeah, I mean, like so many things, right? I mean, you intend down a certain path, and whether it's an interest or I think there was a lot of influences, right? I mean, I think in our lives we many things, especially at a young age, that influence you, right? And I watched so many of my friends that were PhD candidates and getting their PhDs, but no job. I mean, super educated people, right? That dedicate their lives and struggle to make ends meet, right? And it's a difficult path, and I imagine it's still a difficult path today if you're a research scientist trying to get those coveted, faculty positions or whatever. And it's tough.
So then you transitioned into
Yeah.
the Davis Master's program.
I did, yeah. So, I mean, by then, my career was, I felt like I had a good path, but yeah, I was just like, well, what is this wine thing? And tasting wines in France. And I remember one of the very first trips, I was like a young 22-year-old in Bordeaux. And I remember tasting at places like Lynch-Bage and some like crazy cool Bordeaux houses, and eating this incredible food in France, and it just sort of like there was this romantic sort of idea of like, I don't need to do this and struggle, and maybe, and I didn't know anything about the wine business, right? Like I didn't know winemakers. I didn't do had never worked a vintage, but it was like, wow, this is something cool. I got to try it. I want to, and just sort of made a leap of faith.
And I've had experience with yeast, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and it's like, this can't be too hard or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to have many years of tasting and understanding what wine was before kind of getting into the business. And that was just sort of like, yeah, let's try something different. So I did go back to Davis. I mean, that was not having a family or any type of career connection to the wine business. I felt like, okay, I needed a degree to sort of set my path, in the right direction.
Was the science of wine easy for you at school?
I felt like it was. I mean, I was a good student, but yeah, the tasting part was just always more intriguing to me. The science, yeah, I mean, I didn't have to. I had all the chemistry, I had all the whatever biology, and I mean, in college actually, I could have graduated both in biology and botany was one of my favorite subjects actually, as an undergrad, and had I taken a few more classes, I could have double majored in both, but I was like, I just want to get out and start working. So I finished my biology commitments and actually graduated a quarter early just to like, I want to get out and start working. I didn't want to be in school anymore. So yeah, the science part was even today. I mean, Chris knows me well. I mean, we talk about a lot of sciencey kind of things.
Well, Chris has a similar background.
A little bit. I mean, not quite as sciencey, but one of the things I was going to say about your science background, which I think really served you well, and was really kind of fun and interesting from my perspective, but not so interesting from your perspective, is on the fires this year and dealing with all of the compounds that are involved in smoke, and I think that really kind of set you ahead of most other people because you had such a fundamental understanding of chemistry and biochemistry and all of those things, and
Yeah.
to watch you work through on your whiteboard on all the different compounds and how they may or may not be affected and how they can combine and not combine, and it was very fascinating to see you work through all those things.
Yeah, if you had compounds on a whiteboard, that's
More than anything, it was, I feel like my science background, there's the science of it, but it's really the way that some people think, oh, that's kind of a big jump, going from science to winemaking, but it's, I don't know, I feel like science is it's a way of thinking, right? It's deductive reasoning, it's logic, it's detailedness, all those things that I think do make, help create a good winemaker's, sort of, outlook. So yeah, I think it's helped me in many ways, and I definitely, it's not the only path, but it definitely, arguably has worked out well for me. So
well, you obviously are able to combine the science and the art as well.
Yeah.
Because this is not science, this is art.
yeah.
I mean, truly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Cool.
your
I'm
wine's
glad you
always
enjoy
going to
it.
be, oh my gosh, it's delicious.
Yeah.
So Jeff, let me ask you a question I like to ask friends who are winemakers. Do you feel like your appreciation of the sensory aspects of wine, is that, how much of that is learned and how much of it is nature?
Yeah. I don't know. I think a lot of it is learned. I mean, you have to experience taste. You have to experience, I can still remember, that very first taste of, in the cellars at Lynchbosch, 25 years ago, whatever it was. And I think so you have to have an appreciation. So it's kind of learned. I do feel like it's sort of interesting because that sort of muscle memory or that memory is something that's going to stick with me, hopefully for the rest of my life, right? So it's sort of like learning anything, a new subject or whatever. It's being able to recall that and have that serve as a tool for, I don't know, whatever situation. So yeah, it's learned. There's an innate ability of just having that sort of recall on stuff. And I mean, I totally remember, not everything, but about each vintage, you're kind of, I mean, this is what we do, right? We study, we understand weather and tastes, and it all becomes part of a file, in my head.
I think people who become winemakers, even if, you have a great palate, the people who go into that industry or chefs, I think they already have that ability, or they wouldn't have that much of an interest level.
For sure,
So,
yeah, and it's all built into hedonism, the enjoyment of
Exactly.
that, right? And you said you love to cook. I love to cook too. I mean, they all kind of go
I love
hand
to eat.
Yeah, and that
That's what it
too.
boils down
Yeah,
to.
no, absolutely. And that's part of the hedonism part, right? It's like you get enjoyment out of discovering this amazing wine and all the flavors and all that sort of stuff, and so yeah, they kind of all work together. So yeah, I don't disagree that it's all of those things: innate ability, learning, and discovery. All those kinds of things. Yeah.
Now, you have a really interesting background. We're starting now with the winemaking
Yeah.
portion. Was Dan Goldfield the first winemaker? you
Yeah.
worked
So
with?
I worked. Well, one of my very
He's a very laid-back guy.
yeah.
Easygoing.
Yeah.
Totally.
Exactly.
He's very intense.
The
Wonderful man.
My very first internship was in Napa, and I worked for Don Van Staveren
Oh, yeah.
at Artesa, and I really loved him. He's kind of you've met him,
Oh,
right?
yes, he's a...
Professorial and just has
Yeah.
that sort of stately sort of.
He could be one of the fathers of winemaking.
Yeah, and I learned a lot from him in a just internship, and so he was sort of my first. Even to this day, I don't see him regularly, but I'll see him at events and stuff, and it's always fun to talk to him. So I kind of always still I view him as one of my mentors, right?
You started with somebody who is solid,
Yeah,
not
for sure.
some crazy creative.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
a nice.
Yeah, so that was kind of
It's like
almost a
learning
perfect
baking
entree.
first or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly. And as opposed to like being on being a line cook or something like that. But yeah, my first job in the business was with Dan Goldfield. So I was his first. I think I was his first assistant winemaker. So that was in 2001, and 2002. It was early 2002, and it was just me and him, and I did all the work, and Dan was he's Dan.
Dan is. I mean, he's honestly one of the most passionate people in the Pinot world for
Yeah.
sure. He's
Absolutely.
excited. He's one of the highest energy
Yeah, even to this day.
people I've ever
I
met,
mean,
and just a fabulous guy. Very, very, very. He runs something crazy, like
yeah.
20 miles a day.
He, avid. I mean, the guy has like 3% body fat on him, right? He rides his bike all the time, and yeah, I remember times when I was working for him. It's like super passionate about wine and vineyards and all that sort of stuff, and we would go out to these vineyards like way out on the coast, And of course the bike would be on the top of the bar. And he.
Now, was this part of your job? You had to
Well,
go mountain biking with him?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the mountain biking. It was we would drive out to these crazy vineyards, and he'd want to ride his bike back. So I'd have to drive the car back to the winery so he could get his 50 miles in or whatever from like the coast, right? I mean, we're talking,
So
you know,
two
King
go
Ridge
to
Road
the
and just
vineyard
like the up and
that's
down
so
and
funny.
just, I mean, that he's a super strong rider.
Was it your responsibility to make sure he got back?
Well, he would find his way back, right? Because I took the car, and you know, and that was actually one of my first. I don't know. I have a luxurious car now, and it's kind of because of him, because I would drive his car back, and it was just so much fun on these little. I have an M3, which I love to drive. And he was the first. He was like, Dan was amazing because he had this M3 and this whatever unflappable sort of winemaker, right? And
that was part of what you did as an assistant winemaker?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. It's like George Bush when he mountain biked would have to hire Secret Service men who were avid mountain bikers.
To keep up
Follow
with him. But no, that was an incredible experience. To this day, I mean, Dan is a dear friend of mine. We chat, I don't say regularly, but he taught me a lot, and
his passion and enthusiasm is just amazing. There's no doubt about that.
And I mean, definitely, you
can tell this is live.
Yeah, no,
sorry.
yeah.
It's rare for Healdsburg to have this much activity.
So was it after Goldfield that you did your stint as a trapeze artist in the circus? Or
it was during.
All right.
No, it's incredible knowledge base, passion, all that. And we made some incredible wines together. It was one of my favorite. In a lot of ways, like people's origin stories or whatever. I mean, working with him, somebody that had all this passion and knowledge and just energy. I mean, it definitely had an influence on kind of my vision of where I wanted to be, and it was a beautiful stepping stone. I worked for Dan for a number of years, and then from there, I mean, I went to Hartford Court, and I mean,
worked for Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, well, I worked really for Dawn Hartford. Hartford Court, Hartford Family Winery was, that was sort of Dawn and Jenny's thing. I worked. I mean, that was 06 was my very first vintage. After working a number of years with Dan, I mean, I took my first winemaker.
And that
job.
was your first job as a head winemaker.
Yeah, which was a pretty incredible jump actually, and kind of life being full circle. Mike Sullivan, who's a dear friend, who's actually you just had lunch with him today actually. Mike Sullivan, great guy. He was starting Benovia Winery, and so he was 06 was his last, 05 was his last vintage at Hartford, and then I stepped in, took over for Mike at Hartford, and Mike's doing great things. And that's actually where this Cone Vineyard, coming full circle, they own, Benovia Winery owns this Cone Vineyard, and I mean, just shows you how interconnected everything is, right? In the day, in the 90s, Burt Williams and Ed Selyem at Williams Selyem, they were making a Cone Vineyard. And I don't remember the story of why they didn't get the fruit after, I think what was 93, I think was the last vintage that Williams Selyem got Cone Vineyard. And then just, knowing Mike and Joe Anderson, it's like, it would be awesome to have this back in the portfolio. And I think it's a beautiful addition to our portfolio.
It's lovely.
Yeah, it's, I mean, old vines, 50-year-old vines, amazing. Yeah.
I find it really interesting that you've basically had like Pinot immersion. Like all of your jobs have been.
Yeah, my whole career has been in Pinot.
That's pretty unusual.
Yeah, you think so?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, you started with Pinot and kept.
And certainly, I mean,
through that.
I've enjoyed. I mean, I've always enjoyed drinking it, so it's maybe not that much of
that's
a stretch for
good
me.
thing,
So that is a good
How
thing.
fortunate.
It's gosh, yeah, I remember, living in New York and drinking, flowers and all these like really cool wines. And actually, I mean, I've been to Burgundy a number of times as well. And so Bordeaux was sort of my first love, but then Pinot Noir, definitely. And yeah, my whole career has been literally probably within about 5 miles of each other.
I
right?
know, I noticed
and
that.
all in Russian River Valley. So.
Well, except for the stint in the circus, right?
Well, yeah. they traveled through Russia.
That's right.
They were in the trees of Russian
It was
River.
the Russian circus.
They have the Russian. Yeah, no, it's kind of amazing to think. I mean, this is my 21st. This is my 21st vintage, and largely it's all been here in Sonoma County, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, I'm very thankful. So
When you started very young.
young enough, yeah, yeah. It's been incredible. Yeah, I mean, 10 years now at Williams Selyem. It's kind of a dream come true, and just the path that I've taken has been a progression, one on the other, and it's yeah. I mean, I'm very thankful for where I'm at today. So
Well, I think Williams Selyem is thankful as well.
yeah, I think so. I mean, been on a great run of wines, and I think the wines have never been better. So having this amazing portfolio to be able to drink, and you think about the history of Williams Selyem. There's only been 3 winemakers, and
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm totally honored to be part of that.
I used to work at a winery on West Side Road.
Okay, which one?
It was Rabbit Ridge.
Oh, Rabbit Ridge. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the time, but Bert used to drive in his truck and hand me my shipment.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah,
Oh, cool. In the blue truck?
Yep.
In the blue Chevy?
Yeah.
Okay. We still have
So,
that. Yeah.
I know, it was pretty fun.
Oh, that is awesome.
It's just an amazing story. I know people are watching this know the story, but it's literally started in a garage.
Yeah.
It's the craziest
Yeah.
success story, and now
Going home, I drive past that garage, every day, right? It's, what is
Still
it
there?
called? Old World Winery, right there on outside of Fulton, off Fulton Road and River.
Yeah.
Yeah, the garage is still there. Yeah.
I've been drinking Williams Selyem for a long time.
So Jeff, you talk about your whole career and mostly in Pinot, but obviously you make great Chardonnays and Zinfandels.
Yeah.
Was it intimidating at all for you to work on Cabernet?
No, so yeah, we're a really cool project.
I didn't know you were making
Yeah, a little bit of Cabernet. So,
must not be on the list.
well, it's a really small production. I'm happy to taste you on the wine. It's no. The short answer is no, because I think technique-wise, Pinot Noir winemakers are, and by no means I'm trying to be insulting, but just there's a certain finesse that Pinot Noir requires, right, in order and so vision-wise, it was like, wow, this would be kind of interesting. So I took it as a really interesting challenge to make Cabernet in, I'm not trying to say it's in a Pinot Noir style, but really an elegant style, and I think it's been super successful.
Do you put it? Do punch downs and?
Yeah. So one of the crazy.
Should we be nice to the couch people?
Yeah. Please.
And
Yeah.
let them-
Absolutely.
Couch to the couch. Sorry, they're couch people. Our fans.
Yeah, fans.
Our fans here. Couch people.
Yeah. I mean it wasn't. I mean, it was sort of a challenge because it was a totally new concepts, but I really believe in the way that we make the wine. One of the unique things about what we do is, and this is an innovation of Bert and Ed right in the day, instead of having these upright open top tanks, we actually have these horizontal open top repurposed dairy tanks, right? So if you kind of
specifically for the Cabernet, or were they?
This is for all the red wines. So this is what was their innovation.
What was? Okay.
Yeah,
Got it,
back in
got
the
it.
day, right? So like Sonoma County, dairy country, but really before before grapes and other agriculture, and when these strange open top horizontal tanks were kind of going out of business or out of style, out of cheapness, they were like, wow, these are beautiful stainless steel tanks. Let's, instead of buying or manufacturing tanks, they repurpose these tanks. So you come to the winery today and, like, I kid you not, none of my tanks are identical. They're a Mueller tank and a different type of, open top.
They have names?
Or
numbers.
They do have, well, they have numbers, but some of them have names, actually. So it ends up being, in a way, either dumb luck or just, really well thought out. So, because the grapes in these horizontal, they're like 12 feet long, 6 feet wide, but only about 4.5, 5 feet deep. And so they would get in the tanks, they would actually foot tread like they would in Old World, I guess. And for Pinot Noir, that's just beautiful, right? Because you get this beautiful...
You still do that.
And we still do this today.
Okay, now that's an interesting fact about Williams Selyem.
It's super interesting.
Always stomped on the grapes.
Yep.
I guess foot tread, that's a better way to say it.
Foot tread, yeah. Pigeage, as the French would say.
It's very clean, though.
Yeah. Well, we are super clean. It's, we have these...
Wait, what is the French term? Sorry.
Pigeage.
Pigeage.
P-A meaning foot.
Well, that's a romantic thing to do.
Yeah. No, for sure. What is it? I Love Lucy, kind of in a way.
The outfits are super hot, too, because they've got these really cool waiters.
Yeah. And we get sanitized. There's no, no loincloths and getting in there.
I've seen it.
I've done it.
I've not been privileged enough to do it
yeah.
yet, but yes.
And it turns out that this gentle extraction by the foot treading gives the best, I think, out of Pinot Noir, right? The elegance, it's not over extracted, and we still do punch downs as well with a normal stainless steel stick as well. But that part of it is really important. I think, arguably, Williams Selyem wines have this delicious texture, right? And I think it comes in part to that extraction method, right? So flash forward to making Cabernet, same technique, foot treading, dairy tanks, not in a tank with a pump over, automatic pump over machine.
Did you crush?
No, we don't crush. It's all foot crushed effectively.
So what we're talking about is, I think everybody who's watching is sophisticated, I know, but Cabernets are thicker berries, and typically they go through a crusher, and Pinot Noir does not.
Pinot Noir does not.
But it sounds like in this case they're manually.
Yeah. So
crushing, which is a traditional way to make
it is
wine.
Yeah, and the reality too is if you look at, and we'll get into put the science hat on a little bit, the extraction of the skin tannin and the color is an eventual thing, right? So we do extended macerate. There is, you're getting that extraction. You might just be getting it more slowly over a longer period of time as opposed to a really short period of time and getting all of it out, right? So this is a Pinot Noir winemaker thinking, I want to get out the stuff that I want to get out. So eventually I don't over extract the wine, and I don't have to fine it or try and remove the harsh edges. I've gotten it to the point where it's going to go into the barrels and it's going to age beautifully, and it's going to be a beautiful expression of Cabernet. A number of people have tasted the wine, and I think it's just outstanding.
How many vintages have you made of this Cabernet? Of these said Cabernet?
5 vintages actually. But
so
like super tiny production, and it's distinctly Cabernet, but there's sort of an elegance about it, and I don't mean that it's not like you can see through. It's not an insipid
it's
green,
not big and tannic.
Yeah, and for a Pinot Noir house to make a wine, it's very much in line with what a vision of, and that was really the concept, is a Pinot Noir house making a Cabernet, right? And it's, yeah, I think it's absolutely delicious. So the fruit, were mostly about vineyard designate wines at Williams Selyem, whether it be Zinfandel, Chardonnay, or
And
Pinot
how
Noir.
many vineyard deserts do you have?
Oh. Pinot Noirs, there's probably 20 different vineyard designated Pinot Noirs, 4 Zinfandels, 7 Chardonnays, and then kind of a slew of other, kind of things. But so that concept needed to carry over into the Cabernet. So I called the Beckstoffers, and it's like, okay, we gotta
Famous growers.
famous growers in Napa. So
It's in Napa. He said
it's
it.
in Napa, which is throw
is
that part
great.
out of it. It's about vineyard site,
No, Napa
Right.
has beautiful Cabernet.
and so that was sort of the concept in going over there. And
question.
my very first sort of desire, I guess, was Rutherford. So I felt like that was a great place to start as sort of an entree wine into Williams Selyem Cabernet, because Rutherford tends to be elegant on its own as opposed to like super mountaintop, like tannic and
So
just tough
just-
as nails kind
Sorry
of
to
things.
interrupt you, but
Yeah.
now I'm intrigued. So was this your brainchild to do Cabernet,
No,
or is it
I mean,
something Mr. Dyson wanted to do? Or
We experimented a little bit in 2008. So Bob, previous winemaker, had made a wine. We only made it 1 year, and I don't know if it didn't really get traction or what. So we kind of tabled it for a number of years, and then I don't know. I think I can't remember the sort of the next sort of steps, but it was like, well, what else would be interesting for for our customers to see?
And how fun! How
Super fun.
And then
Yeah.
fun that
Yeah.
you get to. It's like a kid going to a toy
Oh,
store.
I mean,
then you get to contemplate what region you may want to.
for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds
And
like great fun.
there's plenty of great Cabernet in the world, and by no means, I feel like our wine is really terrific, and it's got we're looking at it through a different lens, and I think it's a super unique product. I mean, a really unique product from exceptional vineyard sites. And so George was the first vineyard. George III in Rutherford was the first bottling, and then sticking with the Beckstoffer theme, Missouri Hopper got a little bit of fruit, which is also a super underappreciated. That wine has not been yet released. It will be this
And
fall.
what vintage is it?
This would be 18.
Oh.
And it's Missouri Hopper is kind of interesting because it's in Oakville, but right on the border of where Yountville and Oakville, so it's kind of the southern end. And it's this really interesting part of Oakville because the valley pinches down a little bit, and there's a little hillside. It's a really super cool site, and makes terrific wine. It's a super underappreciated wine, I think, certainly in the Beckstoffer portfolio, but certainly in Napa. It's got this almost opaque color, naturally high in acid, so it has this like vibrancy to it. It's got floral notes and red fruits. It's just absolutely outstanding. I look forward to people being able to taste it, yourself included. So.
Oh, I can't
Yeah.
wait. I will be there. Do you inoculate? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we kind of part of the...
Adding I know you
Williams
do.
Selyem
I know
yeast.
you do. And actually, your yeast, a lot of wineries use it.
Yeah.
I use it. The Williams Selyem yeast tends to ferment at higher alcohols. Or
Yeah.
it will reach high alcohols.
It can, yeah. Its purpose, well, it was discovered by Bert this was in the day when they were making wine from Zinfandels from the Martinelli Jackass Hill vineyard. And there was this, I don't remember which year, but spontaneous ferment, and it like fermented really quick and clean, and some of Bert's wines, I actually bought a few recently on auction because they're really hard to find. Some 90s vintage Williams Selyem Zinfandels. And on the label, I mean, they're 16 something. I mean, that's what it says on the label. And I haven't tested them, but I'm pretty sure they're high. And so, yeah, this natural yeast that fermented this made these incredible wines, got up to high enough alcohol, super clean. What Bert liked about it is that it was clean fermenter, meaning it didn't give a lot of off aromas and things like that. Had high alcohol tolerance and had, it was vigorous, right? And not that our Pinots are that way, but we use it for the Pinot Noirs exclusively, well, actually for all the red wines, including the Cabernet, because it's clean aromatically, and it has very sort of reliable fermentation kinetics. So it's like predictable down to like the minute, right, in terms of like how it ferments. So that's a good thing, I think, from a winemaking perspective. You know what you're getting. It doesn't need a lot of nutrients, and so it's like it does what it needs to. It chugs along, and it's like you could set your watch to it, kind of thing.
I have my own yeast.
Oh,
I don't mean to brag.
No, what is it? Do tell.
It's called Hannibal because I discovered it in the 90s.
Okay.
And it eats everything but the tank. It's named after Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
It is, but it
Wow.
just plows through. It's not
Yeah.
like clockwork. It's just crazy.
Cool.
But it will go to very high alcohol.
Okay.
But this isn't about me. This is about you. So, just had to mention
Well,
that.
is there a marketing? Have you marketed it or anything like that?
No, and I laugh because when I first discovered it, it was in the late 90s, and the Williams Selyem was already.
Yeah.
And I swear they kept my yeast like in the refrigerator. They had storage problems, and my yeast was like by the Diet Cokes and the sandwiches in the refrigerator. This yeast got no respect, but it worked, and it would get high alcohols. But
Nice.
But no, but Williams Selyem has been very innovative with
Yeah,
all sorts of things.
It's just so Bert, was super happy with those results. Isolated it, worked with Marty Bannister at Vinquiry, back in the day, and they isolated it. I can't remember where I've seen this, but they're streaks on media plates, and then testing and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, it's kind of cool because Vinquiry still. I mean, it's a different company now, but they still have our stock of the yeast that we, take some scrapings out of it and build up a culture every year.
It's almost like the old mother starters for vinegar.
Yeah.
So it's like Williams Selyem will live forever.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably floating around.
It is. It's probably it's in the courtyard as we speak.
That's part of our story, and from a winemaking perspective too. I mean, Bert was using, which we still do today. I mean, there's a lot of tradition, right, at Williams Selyem, because it's interesting because a lot of those things still, they made sense and they work, right? Francois Frere is our preferred barrel for these wines, as it was 40 years ago. And this is actually our 41st vintage.
It's amazing.
Pretty incredible.
What are we drinking now?
I know. I was just saying,
So that's the Drake.
What are you drinking? Chris is the only one drinking.
Am I ahead of you guys?
Well, you are because.
Well, come on, slackers.
Because I know I am.
No, go for it.
Jeff's being polite. But I'm not really.
What do you think of that cone, though? It was pretty.
It was fabulous.
Just the texture. I mean, those things I was talking about. The texture. Part of one of the other sort of, I don't know, trade secrets or whatever about Williams Selyem is, there's whole cluster in every in every ferment. The Francois Frere. So the whole cluster being, I don't know, do you use whole cluster in any of your wines?
Yes, I do.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's an important part of sort of the architecture of the wine, right? And it's, I remember talking to Bert, when he was still with us a number of years ago. I would taste with him, and the oak. Obviously, start with a great vineyard site that had a lot of great tannin structure from a grape perspective. Then you throw in, the whole cluster, and then, we still use a lot of oak. Bert loved oak, and, the quality of the oak that we use and what Bert was using, together they all kind of work together to sort of fill in all the gaps, right? And so it's kind of it's like cooking, right? You start with, a mirepoix to start, your stew, and you caramelize those, and you red wine reduction, and then, so you start creating these different layers that make the dish complete. And that's what I view with these different levels of tannin from the grapes, the stems, and the oak.
But there's always been a focus at Williams Selyem on vineyard,
Yep.
on the vineyard,
For sure.
on the site.
Yeah.
And that's where Chris comes in, too, who manages the vineyards and
Yep.
works closely with the winemaking team,
Yeah.
because it's not, you start with some
It's a
great
collaborative
ingredient.
process.
It is.
It is very collaborative. Jeff and I drive around every week, and we drive almost every block of every.
Yeah. It's exhausting sometimes.
You should make him drive your bike up to a vineyard, and then he can take your car down.
Oh, God. Yeah, right.
I think honestly it's a key to the success, because Jeff is as involved in the vineyard as I am, and so has a lot of input and a lot of thought, and we talk back and forth about different ideas and different techniques, and knows as much about grape growing as any winemaker I know. So.
Well, the one thing I appreciate about both of you is that both do have a very intellectual and analytical approach. So I can only imagine what your conversations are like. I bet you
we still talk about rock and roll.
saw the size of that fish there.
That's right. We still talk about drug, sex, and rock and roll sometimes. So.
Oh, perfect. So you're well-rounded.
That's right.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, it's a great collaboration. I mean, it's in any one of our vineyards, whether it's Chris or working with, we share some of the Caligari fruit and talk,
Yes.
working with, vineyard managers. It truly is a partnership, and I think certainly my success, the success of Williams Selyem, is really goes as far as the commitment of the ownership of those vineyards and the vineyard management teams that work them, because I certainly have a vision of how I want the wines, what I expect out of the wines, and we can only achieve it when we're precisely doing what we need to do, because that directly translates into the bottle.
I'm going to make this comment because if the Caligaris could be here, they would be here, but they are in Hawaii right now.
Oh, okay, good.
On a vacation.
Yeah.
But
Good for them.
Dawn and Patsy and the family are so proud to be part of your single vineyard program.
Yeah.
It means a lot, and you treat your growers like family, and
100%.
it's not unnoticed at all.
Good. Well, I'm glad.
And
that means a lot coming from you, because I know you're very close with them.
I'm part of the family.
You're part
That's
of the
only-
family too.
I'm basically part of the family. That's why
nice
I
to
get
hear.
some of the
Yeah.
grapes, and you get everything else.
I
That's why I get that little corner.
and you can get whatever you want there.
I know, you've been so nice about that too.
It is really kind of sweet, because the very first year, so Williams Selyem has been buying the Caligari grapes from, since like 2008 or something like that. And 2011 which was my first year at Williams Selyem, was the first year we vineyard designated the wine. And I remember having dinner with John was there, John Dyson, owner of Williams Selyem, Bob, Don and Patsy, and right before dinner, I was like, I gotta go grab a bottle, because Don had not seen the bottle, didn't even know that we had vineyard designated the wine yet.
Oh.
And so we were having dinner at Drapery Kitchen, and pulled out this bottle with his name on it, or family name on it, and he was speechless. Literally,
Well, surely he was crying.
he was in tears.
I know.
Couldn't speak. He was so emotionally
I know.
just I don't know,
And
in awe, and it was a pretty cool thing to see, actually.
Well, he is
super cool.
He's a very Italian, emotional, wonderful
For
man.
sure.
But it fills his heart with joy to see
absolutely.
the Calgary name on your wine.
Yeah. No,
So.
it's super cool. Yeah. But yeah, it starts with, I mean, I've kind of lost track actually. I think close to 30 vineyards, that individual vineyards, and we have multiple, whatever, varieties in those vineyards, but close to 30 vineyards that I work with. And, you know, Chris farms a number of those. But yeah, I've got these wonderful relationships with other folks, right? I mean, the Bookers, the Bacigalupis, the Rochiolis, I mean, Artzaruni, the, you know, vineyards up in Anderson Valley.
What vowels that you're saying
Oh,
here?
yeah. Well, there's quite a few. Are there any V's or Z's? Artzaruni, I guess there's a Z in there. Yeah, I got all the letters.
Chris, didn't you help do the installation in the estate vineyard?
Doug and I did the installation at the Williams Selyem estate, and I think this is the Upper Drake, right?
This is Upper Drake, yeah. So Chris planted this vineyard. It's a really interesting. Who's tasting this now? Are you?
I am.
Just the two of us.
Okay. Do you like it?
I do.
Sure.
I do.
Nothing to see here.
But but what it's interesting is it's a whole different tannic profile than the wine we
Very
just had
much
from
so.
the same year.
So I mean, this is sort of this wine's a bit of a conundrum in a way because it's in Russian River Valley, but it's right on the edge of, I don't know, it's not yet, you know how other parts of the Russian River, there's Green Valley, there's, you know, the Santa Rosa Plain, there's Laguna Ridge. This is on the very sort of far western, kind of the far west frontier of the Russian River Valley, so AVA. So it has, in a lot of ways, it can have dual identity. And this particular wine, to me, tastes like a Sonoma Coast wine in the because it's in that more marginal sort of part of the AVA where it's cooler, the tannin, and particularly this vineyard's on a steep hillside, so that's contributing it as well. But there's all these other influences that create a wine that has more of to me, a Sonoma Coast feel. So I mean, kind of,
absolutely.
kind
It
of,
really
you know,
does.
piggyback on what you said, and that's totally the concept for this wine. So I'm glad you're able to taste that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, it's very good.
Yeah, it's obviously super young. I mean, our wines, I feel like our wines need 5, 7, 10-ish years to really kind of hit their stride. But they're not. I mean, they're not undrinkable. I mean, they're really youthful, but still very, you know, tight.
Now, the two of you work all year round together,
Yep.
correct? And then do things come up in vineyards where you collaborate and make decisions on maybe switching the type of pruning systems, or
Oh yeah.
is that,
Absolutely.
an ongoing?
Oh yeah.
I mean, and we have the benefit of John Dyson's viticultural experience from, I don't know, a generation and a half. So we have not only our ideas and our thoughts and our experiences, but we've got the co-inventor of the Smart Dyson trellis system behind us. So when you're talking about different vineyard techniques,
Yeah.
I mean, he geeks out with us all the time in terms of trying this, trying that. So
Yeah.
no, it's very fun.
Well,
Yeah.
it's an impressive group of people.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, I think lots of know-how, lots of desire, lots of, you know, passion for the product, and yeah. I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways we definitely lead the pack, right? And I think I'm
Yes.
very, very proud of that fact. And yeah, no, I mean, another interesting point about John is, I mean, I think he is all those things that Chris said. He's a really unique owner because, I mean, one, we have a super successful business, but John understands viticulture, right? So when we do come up with something that's sort of like, I'm gonna say weird, or, you know, I'm just gonna use that word,
Unusual.
weird or
Unique.
out there.
Innovative.
From a viticultural perspective, I mean, John can spin it around, turn it upside down, and understand it, and actually know what we're trying to accomplish. And it's not like, so he's a very unique owner in that perspective because he's really, I mean, he has boots on the ground, right? And that's a cool thing to have in an organization like ours, where, you know, we can make these decisions, but they're completely supported, you know.
Well, and he also has a deep enough palate too that he can respect what the results are as well. So he can translate action to results. and go like, yeah, no, I can taste whatever you did, which is also really
Yeah. Yeah, it's a unique situation. So yeah, no, I mean,
Well, and it's fun too.
it's fun.
a lot of work.
I know it's a lot of work, but you all have
Well,
nice
it's fun when we
time.
get to open this bottle and enjoy it with everybody. But yeah, some days it's a lot of work. But we have every single tool available to achieve something great, which I feel very fortunate. Yeah.
And as it turns out, you really don't need that many tools because you're starting with such fabulous grapes.
And we don't, exactly. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, a lot of our process is gravity. It's there's no, yeah. Hopefully, there won't be any shortage of like dry ice and things like that this year, like
Yes,
there
I've
was
been
last year.
hearing-
That was a little nuts.
Yeah, that-
actually.
Definitely.
Yeah.
How do you, I think the Favely thing sort of comes full circle with your background,
Yeah.
which is the
Yeah.
French winery that has
For
small
sure.
involvement with
Yep.
Williams Selyem now.
Yep.
And now you get to dabble with Burgundy as well. So you
Yeah.
must be excited about.
The prospect of that is pretty amazing. So yeah, some news as of the beginning of this year, the Favely family, which is multi-generation, powerhouse Burgundian house, purchased a minority share of Williams Selyem. So yeah, I mean, as of yet, nothing's changed per se. In a few years, they have the option of buying additional percentage of the company. But the prospects are amazing. I mean, funny enough, I mean, I was enjoying and drinking those wines before I even got into the business, so it does kind of come full circle. And they have amazing properties. It's interesting because all those varieties, all those single vineyard wines, Williams Selyem, I'd have to count. It's close to 50 products that we make. The Favely's have more, actually. They have more little bottlings from like all over Burgundy. It's really kind of amazing. So in a lot of ways we're sort of mirror images of each other, right? One in California, one in France, doing kind of similar things, which is pretty cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
And
So I'm excited.
Your future looks bright. Do you have anything you would like to say to all of your fans and customers?
Fans? I don't know, do I have
besides,
fans?
Yes, you have. I've got a fan right
Yeah,
here.
that's true. All of you guys are fans. Thank you.
Well, you do a fabulous job,
Thank you.
and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
To
It's
say
great
the
to be
least.
here.
And thank
Cheers.
you, Chris. And-
Yeah. Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
So nice to
cheers!
see you.
And now we
Cheers.
can share the wine.
Yeah.
So.
well, some of us can.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you again. I
My
sincerely
pleasure.
appreciate it, and
Yeah.
thank you, Chris. And it should be a fabulous harvest.
It's looking
And-
good. It's looking good so far.
And we will be back next week in the Courtyard. And until then, enjoy wine and enjoy life.